I'm actually going to sing that chorus. You think I'm going to get it? I usually reserve my singing for my TikTok page. So. Trust and obey.
I hope you do sing it.
I'm going to.
I love that song.
I'm going to. Just the chorus, though. Been working on my lungs for a while. So I want to contrast Genesis 6-9 with three other passages, or a tradition within the biblical text, okay? So we'll keep Genesis 6-9 in our minds. We'll look at Genesis 18. Genesis 18 is that text. It's hard to see, so I'll summarize it. Is when God meets with Abraham and says to Abraham, you're going to have a child, even though he's very old. And then Abraham and God take a walk together, and they stand on the cliff, I imagine, overlooking the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have this interesting window into the consciousness of God. We rarely get this in the Bible, but God begins to speak to the divine self, right? The relational divine self, just like God does in Genesis 1, let us create humanity in our image. God says, shall I tell Abraham what I'm about to do? And then God says, I'm going to, because I want Abraham to know the justice of God. Mm-hmm. And knowing the end of the story, the way and the justice of God, the approach and the justice of God. And for me, knowing the end of the story, I've always read the way and the justice of God as destroying those evil people, right? As though I would be exempt from that. But in fact, I think the way and the justice of Yahweh is demonstrated before Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed, because God says to Abraham, in a minute, I'm going to go down to see if the outcry of the city is as great as it really is, right? Which implies what about God's knowledge? It's limited. I got to go see. I'm going to go check it out. I haven't made a decision yet. If it is as great, I'm going to administer some form of justice to it. So I think that the real justice is that God is willing to go down and see. God suspends the divine judgment. Mm-hmm. The second form of justice is the conversation that ensues. Do you remember what it is?
What if we could find 50 good and righteous men?
That's right. The negotiation. And remember, put yourself in the narrative. The fabric. This is the Almighty God who has the power to rain fire on cities, right? And Abraham has courage enough to say, what if? To doubt, to converse with God, because God's already created this space for Abraham. And God says, okay, 50, and then what happens?
What about 45?
Yeah, or 45 or 40, yeah. Okay, fine, and then what happens? 30, whatever it is, right? 25. So God, and Abraham keeps questioning God, and God doesn't get mad. This is reflective of the interaction between the man and God in Genesis 2, right? God says, here's your partner. The man says, nope, not going to work, but we'll call it kangaroo. Nope, not going to work. We'll call it dog, though that will be my best friend.
Right.
And he or she will be in all my pictures, right?
Yes.
Is it a boy or a girl? What's
Boy.
Boys,
His
yes.
name's Bad Barley.
Bad Barley. Bad Barley be hanging out in all my pictures. This to me is the righteousness of Yahweh, the way of Yahweh. One who is willing to approach to see, and one who is willing to stop and listen. Got it? And at the end of the day, in fact, 4 people were saved, and then one turns into a pillar of salt, which is a strange element of the narrative that I have no idea what it means, but 4 people are saved: Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters. Got it. Narrative 2. So remember, we're setting these in parallel with Genesis 6-9. Narrative 2. This is this idea that God goes down and sees what happens, feels. God is being empathetic with people. Exodus 32, one of my favorite passages, where Moses is on the mountain with God. God gives Moses the 15 commandments. You remember that? And then Moses drops one, so it becomes the 10 commandments, right? And who is that again?
Monty Python.
It's not Monty Python, but the other. Anyway, he drops one, it becomes 10 commandments, and Moses is about ready to go down the mountain to share the covenant with the people, and he looks down at the base of the mountain. What does he see?
Aaron and a calf.
Aaron and a golden calf, and Aaron is saying to the people, behold, O Israel, your God, who has brought you out of Egypt. And Moses looks at God, and God looks at Moses, and they both look at the 10 Commandments. The first commandment in particular, which says, do not make a graven image. And the second commandment, don't have any other gods before me. And they look down again, and they look at each other, and they both get really mad. And Moses throws the tablets down, which is a symbol of invalidating the covenant, breaking the tablets. And God says to Moses, I am so frustrated. I am going to destroy Israel, all of it, wipe them out, and I'm going to create a new people out of you, Moses. And if I were Moses, I would have said, sweet, all right, the Benzionites. But Moses says, don't do it, God, don't do it. For your name's sake, don't do it. You just delivered these people out of Egypt. Moses pushes back on God. Moses doubts God's plan. And the text, beautiful text, says in the Hebrew, and we use the pronoun for Yahweh because there's a male deity. And God and Yahweh relented of this evil thing that he was about to do. God changed the divine plan of wiping out Israel because Moses said, rethink this. Follow? This is a huge part of the prophetic tradition. Rethink this, God. Don't go this far. I point only to Amos 7, where God is going to destroy Israel for their wickedness because the political and cultural elite were oppressing the masses. And Amos is saying, you can worship all you want, but until you clean up your act when it comes to the justice for the orphan and the widow and the poor and the oppressed, God does not care about your worship. But then Amos intervenes. He says, don't do it, God. Jacob is too small. Notice he's using the word Jacob, moving from Israel to Jacob, like personalizing. Your child is too small, and God relents. God relents. God does not destroy immediately. Makes sense? Now think about in this context, Genesis 6 to 9. When God says, Noah, make an ark, I'm going to flood the world, what does Noah say to God?
Okay.
Correct, not even that, right? Noah remains silent the entire time. It's interesting, look at the narrative. Every time God makes a command, the text says, and Noah did just as God commanded. Noah did just as God commanded. What does Noah not do that Abraham, Moses, and the prophets do?
Push back.
Push back, push back. Who else remains silent in the Genesis narrative, which causes great problems? Early on, Genesis 3 goes back.
The woman,
The woman,
now she speaks.
the woman speaks. The serpent says, you're not going to die. He says, really? And the fruit looked good for consumption, which means she already had the capacity to discern between good and evil. And she takes it and she consumes it. She gives it to the man, and the man says, nothing. Nothing. Men in the room know that posture quite well, right? Whatever you want, honey. To our own fault, right? To our own fault.
Well, it takes us out of a relationship.
It sure does. It sure does.
Without the pushback, no relationship can happen.
That's exactly right. You cannot have a relationship with a silent partner. Unless, of course, they're giving you a lot of money to fund the venture, but you can't. So Noah doesn't push back and the world is flooded. And both God and Noah respond similarly when they survey the carnage that results. What does God do?
Promise not to do it again.
That's right. The text said God relents and promises never to do it again, and makes a rainbow which I recently heard might represent like the bow of a bow and arrow, not pointed toward the earth, but pointed up away from the earth. So the violence of God is directed away from the earth. I don't know. Maybe I buy it, maybe I don't. But God relents. God repents. God, I don't know, seems to be regretful of that decision.
When you said he promised not to do it again, what is it?
Flood the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so he could destroy the earth by other means.
Yeah, no, good question. So water in the ancient world is a symbol for chaos.
Okay.
And so above and beyond a flood, a flood, a historical flood, this is a symbol of chaos overtaking the created order.
Okay.
So no matter what it is, God will never allow chaos to entirely overtake the created order.
Got it.
Yeah. So again, that's right. This is where we have to kind of set aside these facts, or what are the motifs, what are the deeper images? That's a great question. So God promises chaos will never overtake because God has seen what happened. What does God say about creation at the end of Genesis 2 or 1? It's very good. Too often in our church context, historically, when we talk about dominion, is that the earth is bad, right? The material world is bad. This is a Gnostic or a very Greek notion of the distinction between spirit and flesh. God loves the world. God loved it so much that God became flesh. If flesh is so evil, then God would not do that.
Be clear about the Greek notion being flesh and spirit. That dichotomy is just out of the Greek, it's not out of the Jewish tradition, right?
Right, that's exactly right. So the Greek tradition believed that what first existed were spirits, spiritual beings. God is spirit, God is immovable, God is unchangeable. But the spirit world, including ourselves, our own souls, became inclined toward things that were not godly. And we fell from the spirit world into the material world. And then there's this process, according to Plato, for example, of 10,000 years where people learn and learn and learn and learn until they are released from the evil material world and are absorbed back into the spiritual world. And this is picked up by the so-called church fathers. Many.
Oh, yeah, and modern times, I mean, think of this,
Yeah.
holistic health.
Yeah.
Body, mind, and spirit. That's the Greek notion. That's the Hellenistic view of of life, soul, breath. That's all a oneness with everything. Creation, God, you, me, the birds, the bees.
Yes. That's right. It's
So,
called,
yeah, we just overuse body, mind, spirit, body, mind, spirit, body, mind, spirit. You know, let's get a chaplain, let's get a doctor, and let's get a physical therapist in the room. Then we're whole. Huh.
Yeah, right. Right. It's this. God begins a dominion request that we care for and view creation as good as God views it. Right. So that's God's response. Noah's response. He exits the ark, makes a sacrifice to God, surveys the land, and the first thing he does after that is what? No, chapter 9. That's right. He plants a vineyard. And why do you plant a vineyard? Yes, to subdue the earth and to grow grapes, to make wine. And why do you make wine after you participated in genocide?
Forget it.
You got it. It is. Right.
What?
I
To
forget
forget
everything.
everything.
Oh.
To get drunk. To numb oneself to the fact that
Celebration.
something is not so good, right? Yes, you can celebrate with wine indeed, but oftentimes we use things like wine to numb ourselves, to close ourselves to the reality that is not so good. And this is exactly what Noah does. Why does he get drunk? Because he realizes, I should have spoken up. I should have spoken up.
Well, another way of looking at that, though, is that planting the vineyard is ordering the earth.
Mhm.
I I mean, it is what human beings are designed to do. And that's good, but then we go overboard and misuse what we have created.
Right, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So it doesn't necessarily follow that his intention was, I'm gonna plant a vineyard so I can get drunk and forget about all this.
Sure, sure. Although he does get drunk, and it occurs after he leaves an ark that resulted in the destruction of,
But that's part of the repeated pattern of human beings going over the boundaries.
yes.
You know, we misuse.
Mhm.
One of the things that I'm wondering about is, in the last century, we humans have been on the earth however long, 6,000 years, whatever it is. And in the last century, we now have the technology and the capability to really destroy the earth.
Yep.
I mean, seriously destroy it. Or that has not been the case for centuries. How do you think God looks at that as far as, is he gonna, come back or rescue us before that all happens? Or is he gonna just leave us up to our devices and let some wildlife despot who's out of control destroy the earth?
Yes.
Well, I heard some experts say, as far as wiping every person off the face of the earth, at this point with 7.7 million people, it's probably impossible. I'm not saying the culture of the buildings, I'm just saying you can't get rid of everyone, so we'll go on.
You
That's what they're
can,
saying, I mean,
if you make it inhospitable to life,
yeah, but
you can't.
we would still go on,
The circle.
but then there'd be enough people to continue.
Nope, just cockroaches.
No, the experts are saying it'd be kind of impossible to get rid of 7.7 billion and some crevice of the earth. Somewhere on top of the Himalayas, I mean, they're probably
You think
right.
there's gonna be some parcel of land somewhere that the nuclear radiation doesn't hit, and, with all these bombs going off everywhere?
Yeah,
But you know what? I think the reason I joined a No More Nukes rally when I was in 7th grade is because I thought God
the
You
guy
thought
would
God
do
would
what?
would be there. I
Oh,
really,
What
I
did you
was
join?
No Nukes rally. My
Yeah.
dad was a big anti.
You must be younger than me, quite a bit.
And it wasn't God there?
Well, when it seemed like it was very powerful. We lived 15 minutes from all the missile silos that had been built.
Oh,
North
wow.
Dakota.
mhm.
And my dad was saying, none of this can happen.
I would contend God was there, right? Because
Yeah.
people were coming together in this image-bearing way, and the voice of God was being articulated.
Mhm.
But that doesn't work for rulers who have the power to destroy a lot of lives. I mean, look at Putin, look at, the even lesser countries that have nuclear capabilities. Yeah, they probably can't wipe out the whole earth, but it could be really, really bad. And
Yeah.
is God gonna let that happen, or is it gonna be like David suggests, and he's gonna step in before we really do ourselves some bad harm?
And according to this model, how does God step in?
You're an individual. For us.
He finds just a couple of righteous people,
Yeah. through an
Lot and
individual.
his family, and Noah
Yeah.
and Bill Posler and his family.
Or Moses who says, don't let this happen.
Oh,
Who
yeah.
speaks up. The
Yeah.
difference is Noah doesn't speak, Noah does not act,
Mhm.
and the nuclear winter occurs, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Bonhoeffer says that we create technology to subdue the earth, and unfortunately, technology begins to take control of us,
Mhm.
and it's through technology that this blessing to subdue is subverted, and we are subdued by nature.
Oh.
In this ironic way, because we become too dependent upon it. In fact, technology destroys our capacity to empathize, or can destroy it if it's overused. Because we learn to empathize by looking at each other's faces, reactions, and when we're looking at our screens, that's no longer taking place, right? So Noah gets drunk.
Yeah.
I think he's lamenting his participation in this. And it's only after his drunkenness or at the tail end of his drunkenness that he utters his first words of the whole narrative, the only words of his narrative. He gets drunk. Any man, good man who gets drunk, he goes into his tent and gets naked, right? Passes out, and his son Ham sees him. We don't know what happened. The text only says that Ham went and told his brothers. His brothers took a cloth and walked backward, a blanket, and covered him up. Traditional interpretation says that Ham did something to his father that was embarrassing. We don't know that. The text doesn't say that. But what we do know is that Noah wakes up from his drunken stupor, and we know he's still in a stupor because when he finds out what his son Ham does, who does he curse? Ham's son Canaan.
Oh, really?
What I'm reminded of is when I'm frustrated, right? And I'm frustrated at Jack, and I said, darn it, Dexter, that's the name of my dog. Dexter, no, Jack, right? Because I can't get my mind straight.
Yeah.
I think this is Noah. He can't figure it out. So cursed be Canaan, may he be slave of slaves. May he be the slave of slaves, servant of servants. When this text is read as righteous Noah, we pick that up. It has been picked up by interpreters, by pastors, by church leaders, and they say this is God's ordained word, that Canaan will be slave of slaves. And who is Canaan?
Stranger.
Stranger. Ham becomes the father of the Hamitic people, and the Hamitic people traditionally are relegated to what part of the world?
Around the Mediterranean, Middle East.
In Africa.
Oh, yeah,
Africa.
Egypt, yeah.
And the sons of Ham are the Africans.
Yeah.
And when Noah is regarded as righteous, even in his curse of Ham, his curse of Canaan, then in order to fulfill the curse of Noah ordained by God, what must we do to the African people? Enslave them. And this was used as late, if you're interested, Benjamin Palmer, the First Presbyterian Church, New Orleans, Louisiana, before and after the Civil War, or during the Civil War, was writing sermons and giving speeches appealing to this text, saying God has ordained the South to maintain the institution of slavery predicated on Noah's curse, because if we liberate the enslaved people, they will run wild and they will destroy themselves. So it is as benevolent fathers that we enslave.
When you think about it, you blame the wrong person.
What's that?
We blame the wrong person. It was a mistake.
That's how I read it, right? We don't push back on Noah's curse, just as Noah doesn't push back on God's.
And his son didn't speak up, obviously.
Mhm.
No,
Right.
I did.
Son, the other sons. And I think this is this kind of the prophetic power of the biblical text, in that the implications of this curse continue to unfold in
So-
modern history.
Yeah.
So let me understand this. We make policy based upon the rantings of a drunk guy.
That has been the case.
Okay. Doesn't seem right to me.
But, it's like recently, it was about a month ago, the Presbyterian Church in Scotland just apologized for people who were killed as witches
Mhm.
in like the 16th century. They actually made a formal apology.
Hey,
So we're
reparations,
better off than most.
reparation about slavery has been going on now for 15 years in a lot of denominations. They're providing apology services and saying we did an evil. And they're really powerful if you ever want to have one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seminaries are acknowledging their participation in that. Colleges are, universities are. So this is setting the flood narrative, the chaos narrative side by side with Genesis 2, the creation narrative, Genesis 18, Exodus 32, the prophetic tradition. And I read it not as a historical statement of what happened, but as a divine revelation of what God intends for us to do, to push back, just as the prophets did, to push back. Because when we push back, when we doubt, we have skin in the game, right? We have skin in the game. And actually doubt and when it's done well, shows a high level of respect for the other.
Is that the sermon?
I think that's part of it. I'll figure it out. I haven't even thought about it yet.
Okay.
What
Well,
was the text again?
it's
I don't-
Thomas, yeah.
Thomas, that's right.
That's right, doubting
Doubting
Thomas.
Thomas.
Doubting Thomas.
Okay. I just made that
Thank
connection
you.
for you.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I'll preach for you then.
Look on the other over there.
Thoughts about that? Questions?
Wow.
Well, thank you.
I presented that
Yeah.
before and people haven't been happy with it, but that's how I read it. I'm happy with a lot of what I say. But that's that pushing back, that divine partnership that occurs both in the beginning of Genesis 2 or the middle and the end with the partnership between the man and the woman. As you were saying, David, or confirming, affirming. That's where the image is manifest, at least in part. And that's where growth and health results.
How does reasoning with God, how does it become, bargaining or making deals? If you do this one thing for me, I'll promise I'll, follow you the rest of my life, whatever.
Right.
Because that's not healthy, right?
I agree. Again, it comes back to our intentions. Are intentions self-oriented or are they other-oriented?
And
Always with
okay.
the self involved, right? We can't get rid of ourselves.
Mhm.
the nature of the promise here is that it's unconditional. We don't God didn't put conditions on when he gives the rainbow.
Yeah.
That only happens with Moses down the road, that's where it starts, that conditional promise, covenant.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, when I bargain, I'm usually doing something for myself. This is an exchange economy versus a relational connection.
Okay.
And you know that I think I said this last week. It's hard for me to accept. It's hard for me to receive because I am so influenced by a culture where it's a bargain.
Mhm.
It's capitalistic. I'm not an anti-capitalist by any means, right? But that's how I operate. If you do this for me, then I feel like I have to do that for you. That's self-oriented.
Okay.
I don't want that. So yeah, I don't think there's a lot of room for bargaining in that sense if we're going to be creative. Because we have to be open to the fact, we have to be open, 100% open to that I'm completely wrong in this. So right, Abraham says, don't destroy Sodom. Maybe there's 50 people, he's wrong. And Sodom and Gomorrah, they're destroyed. That's just the way it is. We have to be open to that possibility with the salvation of 4 people minus 1. With Moses, the entirety of Israel is saved, delivered. So when we come in with our own image of what should happen, we're no longer self-limiting. And that's hard. That's hard for me, for sure. And the text opens with Noah was with righteous men to have walked the earth at this point in time. But remember, righteous people can do not so great things. Right? David is a prime example. A man after God's own heart commits adultery and then murder, etc. Okay, can I stay?
Next week, Steve, on the art, it's your art show, #2, History of Christianity through Art.
Nice.
Our guy, Steve Wong. And preach well.
All right.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sincerely.
Great.